Let's talk about Henry Thoreau's interest in philosophy of life. As we read Philosophy 225 authors, let's be on the lookout for life concepts expressed in words like human life or life in living or my life and civilized life. Those are words that may give us hints about our author's view about the good life. Henry Thoreau is an author who does a good job focusing on the topic of human life. Let's review together the very first page of chapter 1. Henry Thoreau writing, "I lived there 2 years and 2 months. At present I am a sojourner in civilized life again." He goes on to write, "I should not obtrude my affairs so much on the notice of my readers if very particular inquiries had not been made by my townsmen concerning my mode of life." And then at the very bottom, "Moreover, I, on my side, require of every writer, first or last, a simple and sincere account of his own life, and not merely what he has heard of other men's lives." That book, Walden, was published in 1854. Also in 1854, Henry Thoreau went on a lecture tour, and he came to Rhode Island. He came to the city of Providence, and he also came here to the city of New Bedford, where I am today, and he gave a lecture. I want to show you the first page of the lecture. It's today titled "Life Without Principle." At that time, he used the title "Life Misspent," and he tells us, or he tells the audience, "I will not talk about people 1,000 miles off, but come as near home as I can." And then he says, "Let us consider the way in which we spend our lives." In short, Henry Thoreau is an author that pursues life and not as much persons. Henry Thoreau certainly talks about character and the importance of good character, but life is the more important topic. My conclusion is Henry Thoreau pursues the philosophy of life. What is philosophy of life? Here's a good definition. Philosophy of life examines assumptions about human life, including good life. One very important and basic question in examining our assumptions is to even ask, what do we mean when we're talking about human life? There are many senses in which we use that term. Biological life is perhaps the most common sense of the term life or human life. Do we mean to be talking about biological life, something shared with plants, fungi, bacteria? No, in Philosophy 225, we're not talking about biological life. Sometimes when we use the term human life, we mean like being alive, the phenomenon of being alive, something shared at least with animals. Being alive, I think, has the connotation of being conscious, being aware. That's what it means to be alive. It's not true that that's our topic in Philosophy 225. We're interested in human life. So here's a definition of human life based on what I think are some ordinary assumptions about what human life is. Human life is the phenomenon stretched from birth to death, expressed in stories or in one story, and occupied by persons, in which one person is the main character of that life. We may need to revise this definition and improve this definition as we examine our assumptions. That's a good definition for now. What I'd like you to know is that there are some very interesting issues in the philosophy of life that are good to think about even before starting to solve the question about the good life. These are issues which I've mentioned previously in the semester. The first issue is the relationship between person and life. There are many possible relationships between a person and a life. Most importantly, does every person have a life? And does every life have a person? We assume that to be true, but perhaps that is not true. Perhaps it is possible for there to be a human person like me or you, and yet not a life. And perhaps it's possible that there exists human life without also a person existing. I think our assumption is that for every life there is a person, and moreover, that person is the conductor of that life. But there may be also other possible relationships between person and life. We'll find that Henry Thoreau is close to our ordinary assumptions that as a person I ought to conduct my life, and that my life is in ways a very important reality to pursue. I mentioned in the definition that human life is something that is expressed in stories or with one story. Somebody might hear that proposal and come to the conclusion that human life is only a story, that there's no reality to human life besides the human person and the story which they tell. If that's true, a good life is just simply a good story. That wouldn't be a very important topic. So an interesting issue in the philosophy of life is, what is the reality of life? What does the reality of human life consist in? We certainly think that there are human persons, and that's because they're visible, observable, but the phenomena of human life isn't observable, isn't something obviously visible. And then an important issue which Henry Thoreau and our next author will have some ideas about is human life something inherently private and individual, something that I must pursue myself, or is human life something that may be shared? For example, could two persons live the same life? Or could two persons meeting together for a short time in some way share life? Possibly human life is something both private and shared, but we could further ask, where are the boundaries to be drawn, and are there all kinds of possibilities to be drawn? Henry Thoreau is known as a student of nature. He's identifying to us that he studies nature, especially phenology events. Why is it that Henry Thoreau pursues this topic of life? I have some conclusions I would like to share with you. Henry Thoreau is a thinker that avoids abstractions. Henry Thoreau thinks that ideas and insights and writing should be true to our experience. Some philosophy is very abstract and divorced of our experience. So Thoreau, for example, tells us, I'm going to talk about my actual experiences and how I thought and what conclusions I came to in those experiences. So that's one reason why Henry Thoreau is very interested in the topic of life, because that's something we are all engaged in. Also, Henry Thoreau is somebody who thinks that there are truths beyond what is simply visible to us. He thinks that there are greater truths, things that are unobservable, but that we could still discover. This reminds us of Aristotle's proposal that there are some amazing, extraordinary truths that we can simply wonder about, that we can contemplate about. Henry Thoreau believes that there are such truths as a student of nature. And for him, life is a thing that's complex and deserving discovery and full commitment. So that's why I think Henry Thoreau focuses on the topic of life. I'd like to summarize now 3 unique insights from Henry Thoreau, which don't quite yet answer the question, what is the good life, but do provide us some food for thought. The first insight is on pages 8 and 9. This is the beginning of chapter 1, where our author makes several statements about human life. Here, Henry Thoreau says, on pages 8 and 9, human powers and life are not 100% mapped out. Our author thinks we today assume that human life is thoroughly mapped out and the good life is thoroughly known. And our author proposes that there's much that we have not yet even explored. For him, this is hopeful, that there are possibilities untapped, that there are ways of life not yet pursued. In chapter 1, our author tells us on page 9 that there are various human lives, that there's a diversity of possible human lives. You recall Aristotle stating that there are 3 human lives, and he ranks those human lives. Henry Thoreau appears not to want to rank the possible human lives. He insists that they're diverse. And then on page 63, he also insists that each person ought to pursue their own life. So again, there's an emphasis on sort of the individuality of a life in Henry Thoreau. And many people admire Henry Thoreau for exploring that topic. And then finally, in chapter 2, on pages 80 and 81, there are several paragraphs talking directly on the topic of human life. And this is some of the most powerful writing in Walden and some of the most memorable writing. And there Henry Thoreau distinguishes authentic life and inauthentic life. This is a distinction that a later philosopher in the 20th century explores, and we'll look at that together. The simple idea is this: according to Henry Thoreau, it's possible to be living and yet not truly living human life. And he says there, I wanted to live what is truly human life. In short, authentic life. Many of us today are not truly living human life. In short, we are in inauthentic life. And our author, having simplified his living and committed to intellectual activities, thinks that he's going to make some discoveries about what human life truly is.